Still scares me.
The day of redemption is at hand.
Repent, and thou shalt be saved.
Good evening and welcome to Aletheia Radio's own Off the Books, a place and the only place where you could find the Christian perspective mixing with today's topics and current events.
Amen. Welcome, people. Here we are. It is May 25th, Wednesday,
Yes,
May
is.
25th. Welcome, everybody. It is me and you again tonight.
Yes, it is.
It is me and you again.
We have been successfully abandoned.
Yeah, but that's okay. Our good friend T-Bird, or Tim, we should say.
He's handling some good news, so
Yeah,
that's awesome.
he just purchased the house, so he's handling that right now. Our good friend Ray wasn't available, but you are
He's
stuck
working.
with us too.
Yes, you get to look at our mugs for the next 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on. Lot we want to talk about tonight. We're going to discuss. I think this is going to be a little series that we're going to go into. It's going to be the war on words.
Yes. So today we're going to get into the basic definition of that. We're going to branch onto more examples in the next two parts of this. But we'll start off with current events. We'll start off with some obvious things that are happening around us right now. Some terrible things, some unfortunate things that I really wish we didn't have to talk about this, but we do. It's the importance of the Bible. Bible doesn't promise us that things are going to be easy. God promises us that He gives us a way to deal with it and a way to understand the point of suffering in the world. Not saying that it's easy to understand, but there definitely is something behind that, so to speak.
Yeah, and what we're talking about is the shooting in Texas. The poor children that were murdered there, and teacher, and it's very difficult. It's a very difficult situation there, and like Caesar said, we're dealing with these issues everywhere in some form, and it's what do we have our confidence in? What's our faith? Where do we put our faith in when these tragedies strike? We see a lot of people turning it into a political thing, or some sort of law that's not passed, or something other than it's evil, and it's an issue of a heart. It's not how we can harden these targets to protect people. It's how we need to soften hearts and gain.
Hey guys, by the way, just hey Marge, hey Felicia, hey Joe. Thanks for watching. How you guys doing?
Guys, how you doing?
So let's talk about this. Let's talk about how we process something as terrible as this as Christians, because I think if you've watched our show a couple times, we're very big on defining things. So the importance of this topic of the shooting is so much more than just feelings that we're experiencing right now. It's more about what's being said about it, and the reasons why these things happen. Partially is due to us not addressing the actual issues because of words being used for people's own motives.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. There's a lot of that going around. So we had the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, right?
Yep.
He was holding a conference about it. Now, mind you had families that were grieving for these children in that moment, and something that some people would perceive as heroic happened. Now, to understand what really happened in that conference and to really give it a real perspective, you have to actually take the time to do the homework on what you're criticizing. And I think that's a big problem that we have. We jump to criticizing based on our emotions without actually really knowing the backgrounds of what's really happening in front of us.
Yeah, and it is an emotional time. I mean,
Absolutely.
especially when you deal
Children.
with children.
Yeah.
You know.
And God gave us emotions to experience the full beauty of humanity in its pain and in its joy. And I'm not against emotions. I'm not saying that your feelings don't matter, but when it comes down to um criticizing a situation, I mean, even demonizing other people, you have to ask yourself, what is the motive behind the person that demonizes the other? Because when it comes to a time like this, the first thing we should do is put aside our differences and focus on the real problem, which is, how do we do a better job at preventing these things from happening? So the
Yeah.
shooter killed what? I think the number is
19,
18,
19
yeah,
kids,
18, 19,
and I think one
and a teacher.
maybe one more. I think I'm not sure if that first initial guard got. I know he got injured. I'm not sure if.
Yeah, there's some details about that aren't really clear. We're getting multiple, multiple resources giving different descriptions of what happened, but ultimately, what it boils down to is the same thing. So, for example, everybody has different arguments, and there's a lot of these like common argument points that people have, because like you'll find some people that like that support guns will say stuff like well, you don't ban cars and car accidents kill people. And then some people say, well, if you did, and then on the other side of the story,
alcohol.
Yeah, alcohol. You say you don't ban alcohol. And then on the other side of the story, they say, well, the gun was there, the gun was used, so we have to get rid of that. Now, listen, I don't think guns in the hands of the wrong person are a good thing, but I think in the hands of the right person that can protect and save lives, I think that kid was capable of killing a lot more kids in the process,
definitely.
but was stopped by a person with a gun. So we have to be very careful about what we pick and choose to hold. Oh yeah, Marge said 2 adults actually.
Two
were
adults,
killed,
yeah.
yeah. So we have to be very careful about our opinions, because our opinions are. I mean, think about every bad decision
And
you've made
dealing
in
with
your
those
life.
opinions through emotion.
Yeah, especially
and
that.
it's heightened emotion, and we all get it. But one thing what we need not to do is start placing blame here or there and anything else like that.
Exactly.
Because I think one of the main issues, and if you look at a lot of these mass shootings that have happened, starting even in Texas in 1966, when you had the first mass shooting there, it was PTSD. It was a former soldier, and then even if you deal with like Sandy Hook, and then even now, I mean, the person is dealing with not just mental health issues, but even deeper than that, serious, I don't know,
Well, deep embedded traumas will do that.
Yeah.
If you're talking about someone who is capable of taking a life or looking to take a life.
I mean, he shot his grandmother in the face.
Yeah, I mean, let's pray for her. Make sure she makes it out.
I'm pretty sure she's in critical condition, and she's alive, which I pray that she makes it through this. But to have that type of callousness to do that, and you never know what evil is inside of a man or a woman, and for him to come to an age where he can buy a rifle, whatever, it's not. They don't know. I mean, I'm all for gun control as far as where.
I mean, do an extensive background check. I think that's the most important
and
thing.
I think if you are going to have a firearm, you should be trained to use it. Where it's, you don't just go buy it. You should be like, okay, I buy it. It's kind of like driving a car. You buy it, but you got to do a test drive.
Absolutely. I mean, and we could take it even deeper than that. Let's talk about let's talk about a majority of these mass shootings. Well, they used to be younger younger men. I mean, honestly, they're predominantly male. You don't see women shooters going around. So that tells me something off the bat. That tells me that there is a condition, and that is not original. It's not original to this case. It's not unique in any way, shape, or form, of young men not being able to process anger. And even older men now, as we see some of the shooters, the Brooklyn shooter was older, was an older man that you didn't expect. So it's not suited to age limits. It's just a predominant number. It's statistically more likely to be a younger person. But now let's talk about why young men that have experienced trauma go through these motions, have this rage inside of them where they feel to do this. And what is the importance of words and communication when dealing with young men that are going through these things? Because we grow up our entire lives not properly processing things that are right in front of us. Maybe because our parents don't know any better, we weren't taught better, or maybe when we got older, we didn't seek
Or
the
you
right
don't
amount
have the
of,
parents, you don't have that
or you don't
father
have
figure.
parents or father figures.
You know, I
Yeah.
think that was the case with this young man.
He was living with his grandmother.
Yeah.
His mother was actually being evicted from the house. He came from a
Right.
troubled household.
Yeah.
So now, I mean, if your mother and father are at odds, and you don't have somebody to talk to. Now, listen, I know,
But I even think that it's deeper than that, because for someone,
well, no,
I
that's a
just
big,
think,
yeah.
but think about this: to someone to look at a child and take their life. I mean, there's a deeper issue.
Deep-rooted
I mean,
psychological
it's
issues that were
like I
not
said, that's
addressed. Yeah.
beyond mental health to me. At that point, that's just pure evil, and that's going to be in this world. We're going to have it.
Yeah.
There's going to be pure evil in this world, but you can't then take the good citizens' rights away where they can protect themselves from this, because criminals don't follow the same laws we do.
No, they don't.
You know?
It's not like if you ban guns, the criminals are going to say, "Oh, they just banned guns. I guess I better trade mine in." No, they're going to say this is an opportunity for more things to happen. And if you don't believe that, look at the states that have the strictest gun laws that these things happen in.
Yeah.
But
And again, I don't even want to get into that, because what happens is, even what happened with at the Abbott's addressing the
Yeah.
media, Beto O'Rourke came in. He kind of like was
Beto
just,
O'Rourke, yeah.
he was just like blaming and saying, "Hey, this is on you. This is on you."
Yeah.
And because of the gun laws. But I don't believe it is that. If you see what we've been going through, and we had a podcast that we did about mental health, you'll
Yeah.
see a big big influx between the past, maybe 10 years of mental health issues. And
Absolutely.
I think that's
he also lied while he was there. See, this is one thing I
Yeah.
don't like.
Yeah.
Listen, you could be on either side, but we should all come to the understanding that dead children are not a good thing.
Yeah.
When you politicize and you walk on the graves of the dead to make a point, to virtue signal, or to do whatever it is,
Or to point fingers.
that's not
Of
good.
whose fault?
Yeah, look at anyone who demonizes other people for what they do. If you take the time to demonize others, it's only to shine light on yourself. That's it. And that's not a virtuous thing. That's not what an integral person does.
Yeah.
Number one. But yeah, he lied about something. He was
Beto,
making
you're talking about,
yes, Beto O'Rourke
Yeah.
lied. He was interviewed after that, and they asked him, and they were asking him a bunch of questions and refused to answer them. What he kept doing is he kept trying to shoot down his political partner after that. You saw that,
Yeah,
right?
that's all he did.
Yeah,
It was
and then he
just
said,
speaking his political view against the opponent.
yeah, and then he said that, look at Texas, we're in 50th of
In
mental health, which actually is not true, because I immediately went and I looked up the numbers on multiple sites, and actually Texas lies somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
It lies
Yeah.
somewhere in the middle. New York and Connecticut were up there. California was up there. But regardless, listen, it doesn't matter.
I mean, and you can talk about gun laws. I mean, Connecticut and New York have some of the strongest gun laws,
And we have the highest rates of gun violence,
and
like in
not
Chicago, too,
right.
as well, yeah.
And Sandy Hook happened in Connecticut.
Exactly.
So it's really, I mean, it's really, I don't think it's a law that could be passed. Although I believe that schools, let's say, shouldn't have the authority, the state should have the authority. If it's a public school, the state should have the authority to say, okay, these are the things that we're going to implement. We need armed guards. We need this, that. You only need one entrance. You need, there's certain guidelines. It shouldn't be left up to a school board where,
No, it should.
they serve for 4 years or 5 years and they're gone. And then it's new people in and out,
Yeah, that's the problem. You need somebody to have something that stays steadily in the best interests of the kids, and we're not getting that. We're getting politicians as school board members.
Yeah, and we spend a lot of money, our taxes and things like that in our public schools. So I mean, these safety precautions should be the first thing that happens. I know I went to Amityville High School and we used to have metal detectors at one point.
Yeah, yeah.
we had armed security guards at our school, at one point. So
and it's bad. And that's one thing the Bible talks about on several occasions is lawlessness.
Right.
Being a law-abiding citizen doesn't mean that you agree with a lot of the laws. It just means that being lawless, that rebellion that you have, if you have rebellion for authority, then there's something very deep rooted going on inside of you. You don't have to like it.
Yeah, that lawlessness that the Bible speaks of is the outcry of what your heart wants to do.
Exactly.
You want to be lawless, it's a continuing what does the Bible say, that the outburst of a heart is more evil in its in its condition and things like that. But at the same time, we search for these outsource things that we're trying to fix when we need to look at the inside and what the problems are.
And this is where we're getting to this, and this is the most important part of this conversation, as far as dealing with the death of children. The teacher as well, she was trying to protect the kids. As far as dealing with that, I mean, we all ultimately have to get to the source of it. Now, I'm not asking you to psychoanalyze every killer and get to the bottom of it. I'm asking you to look at the condition of your own heart and ask yourself, are my opinions and my arguments to people from a genuine place?
Right. I mean, I seen right away people just posting things like gun control and this is going to happen. This is going to happen. It's like,
not about them.
Yeah. It's like,
it's not about your opinion right now.
Really, I think the church needs to stand up. The church needs to stand firm. I think it's part of our ability to be in that community. And, we have the police, we have those that are armed and that can come in and help. But I think in that situation with these young boys and that are mostly the ones that are doing the shooting, like there should be some kind of intervention on where we can get to them before these situations happen.
Absolutely. And shout out to my church, Sound of Heaven. They're outside. They're not even in the four walls right now. Pastor Johnny took them outside and they're praying out in the street for these families and the souls of these children. And listen, whether you like it or not, the shooter and his family.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to pray for everybody. We can't have selective prayer just because we're offended and we're emotional about some evil that they've performed. God says to love your enemies. Now, let me tell you, this kid is my enemy. He stood for everything that I don't stand for.
Well, think about it. I mean, Jesus washed the feet of the
people that betrayed him. And it's hard and it's not easy, but we really should talk about what that model of Christ is supposed to represent in our lives.
And I think getting to what we're talking about in the next few episodes is the words that we use and how we define them and how we use them,
Exactly. So,
and the language that we use.
So let's talk about language a little bit, because that's the best word you could have let off with right there. Yeah. Language. With the Tower of Babel, God scattered everybody and he created language, and they couldn't understand each other.
Right.
So why do you think they couldn't understand each other when he did that? What was the importance of God changing the tongues of people?
Why do you think?
Well, I think personally, because what happens is when you over communicate, you start making up your own words.
Well, they were also
and changing the definition of the words.
They were making a tower to get to him, thinking that they can reach him in some sort of way. Yeah. And that's when it wasn't about that.
It wasn't.
And it was like, you know what, if I change their words, if I change the languages of how they could do it, they're not going to be so driven to try to be me. Kind of like the beginning. I mean,
they'll scatter.
They scatter.
Yeah.
It's from the even from the beginning, the war on words started in the garden, where Satan said to Adam and Eve, did God say that, or did he say this?
And meanwhile, they knew what he said.
They knew what he said.
They knew what he said, but it was nice to hear. It was comforting to hear something that agreed with your flesh in the moment.
Right.
And I think that's what we do a lot right now. And that's the importance of the story of the Garden of Eden, because you're coming from a place where you have everything. But for some reason, when you have everything, that's something inside you that wants
it's
more.
Not enough.
Speaks out.
Yeah,
exactly. So we live in the greatest country in the world. We live in America. We have the freedom to do everything. We have access to anything. If you're in bed at night and you say, wow, I want ice cream.
I thought you were going to say a Whopper.
Oh, I would totally. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Right.
Let's use my favorite fast food treat of all times. If I say I want a Whopper, I can get up. I can find one. I mean, I don't think I'm going to be up driving at 1:30 because I fall asleep early. But yeah, I can get up and go get one. Now, what happens when you have too many options in life? You get hungry for more options. It is what it is. So it's like you have 3 kids. How would you feel? Okay, so you have you, your husband, your 3 kids, right? So it's 5 people. What if everybody didn't like the same thing and you said, okay, I'm going to cook you all something different. Not only that, I'm going to give you options to eat. So I'm going to make 3 different plates for eat. I'm going to make 15 plates a night just to make sure you get what you want. Your life would be miserable serving that other person, because all they would do is they would want another option after a while because they're so used to getting it. And this is the typical human condition. So now how do words play into all this? So now when we don't get what we want, we start playing with language. We start playing with words. You see it happening all around you right now.
Yeah.
So
you can manipulate situations with the way you word something.
Absolutely. This is the argument that a lot of people have with pronouns. You don't get to reinvent words. And honestly, I agree with that.
Well, it's not even just words will get invented. I mean, from the beginning, I think we come from a Germanic language.
Yes.
You know, the history of English came from, Germanic tribes that came in, and it worked its way to like through Britain and stuff like that, where we have now. Now words will change, but it's really how we define a certain thing.
Exactly.
Like the way English words, we say pig or chicken, where a French word was poultry or pork.
Yes.
So it means the words come different meanings from different languages, but they're defined. Like it's even when you read the Bible, you got Hebrew, you got Greek,
Aramaic.
somewhere Aramaic, but when you look into it, the words have a meaning to them, especially like in the Greek form. The Greek used certain words where that word meant not only that, but when you used another word with it, it meant a whole different thing.
Absolutely.
But the definition of that particular word was exactly what it was.
Yeah.
And a good way to think about it is like having kinds. You have humankind, you have elephants and lion and tigers and
bears. Oh my.
Right. But you have the different kinds of animals. You can't change that.
Yes, because
you'll have different branches of it, but you can't change the original.
Yeah. So if you say something in Spanish and I translate it to English to somebody else, the meaning is just the same. Some of the dialect, depending on slang, might alter the meaning depending on what area you're from, but ultimately the message is the same. This is the argument that people have over time. They say, well, if it was translated in this many languages, how do you know what the original word is? Well, that's the answer right there, because it was translated in multiple languages. As long as you have multiple languages, you have multiple languages to compare it to.
Yeah.
And through that comparison, you can get the defined word. You can get the refined word, if you will. You know what I mean? Like, so for example, I just had to look at it before because my brain is all over the place today. But so you're talking about the Greek language.
Yeah.
Okay. So looking up different mental health cases and stuff, it talks about philosophia. Philosophia is like the passion for wisdom, I believe it
Right.
is. That's where you get the word philosophy from. So we make these words, and that word has become English, but the two words that made it up were predominantly Greek, but it still has the same meaning. So here's the problem with what's happening with words today. For example, you can have words that mean the exact definition, but even the people that are listening to these words might not know the real definition and just get into a habit of saying them. So what happens? You hear a lot on
Love.
the news today. Yeah, love.
Love is
Exactly.
like the
It's a big one.
it's a big one.
But what about like misinformation and disinformation?
Right.
Do you know what the difference is?
Yeah.
Because what happens is during certain political eras in the recent years, they said, oh, like they're running a campaign of disinformation. Well, disinformation means that you're just saying a straight out lie. And then they say the spread of misinformation. Well, misinformation means that there's truth
Truth
to
to
it,
it, but there's some sort
but
of
there's some sort
yeah.
of twist to it in the way that it's being worded that
Right.
might be manipulating you. So if that's the case, we're all guilty of using misinformation. But when you start mixing these words up and you confuse people with them, the only thing they hear is lie.
Well, that's also taking the bigger picture. You have what the words mean and the big picture of them. They kind of relate to each other. It's kind of like the Bible in a way, where you can't just take one passage of scripture. It has to be also put within the whole context of the Bible in order to get its interpretation and its definition. It's similar the way Satan kind of when he tempted Jesus,
Mhm.
and he said, didn't the Bible say that? Didn't God say this? And Jesus said, no, this is what it says.
Yeah.
And didn't, and he
Don't
kept going
tempt the
back.
Lord thy God.
He
Don't do
because
it.
what you're doing is you're taking something and you're putting your meaning to it when you're not taking it in full context.
And the importance of that story is the representation of evil came through bending language. And that's why this topic is so important. This is the one way we express our feelings, our emotions, all of them, our fears, our shame, our guilt, our joy, our happy moments. Like, this is how we express that. This is how we're supposed to get to, if it's not a common ground, at least an understanding.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about the power of words, if you change the definition of words, which is happening right now big time, if you change the definition of words, what happens is the truth will get lost in it, and then you could make up your own truth. And you could play that game all you want, but what it boils down to is we live in a society today, and just the world in general, that tells you, if you feel it, do it. Do what you feel. Do what is going to make you happy. Well, what if it's temporary happiness? You have to ask yourself, if me doing what makes me happy is valid, does that matter when it comes to temporary happiness? Or am I looking for something that's long-term joy?
That also
happiness?
goes, I mean, how do you define it? And what does it mean to you? So my happiness could be that I want to hurt somebody.
Yeah.
So that's my happiness. So is that something that,
Yeah.
but
Because it's not happiness. What you're feeling is carnal satisfaction at that
Right,
moment.
right.
But you mistaken it for happiness because your definition of happiness is skewed.
And we do that. And even, we all deal with it, where we try to see something as an issue with myself or an issue with somebody else, and we try to define it. We
Yeah.
try to say, okay, we have to try to figure out what the meaning of this is, and why, and define the problem so I can fix it. So we try
Yeah.
to define it,
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, so who is giving you your definitions? You know what
Right.
I mean? That's an important area to touch on, because you got to know, like, if you only get your definitions from one area and it's being filtered through another area, you have to make sure that the definitions are real.
Yeah.
You need to take the time, and this is the thing. If okay, for example, if, say, we're talking about the Bible, we're talking about theology, the importance of words is good, because it's like Sean said before, you want to search out the ancient Hebrew, the Greek, the Aramaic. You want to find out the proper meanings. You want to find the context in which these words were used in, so you can make up a full understanding of what the word is trying to say in there. If you're talking about philosophy, well, you have to go to the part of the world where that philosopher came from. You have to be in contact with that time and really dive into what that area in time was doing.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you can't just take things at face value. You can take people at face value, but you can't take their words so much at face value all the time, especially if you're talking about public figures. And a lot of times we wind up making public figures out of people that aren't,
Yeah.
or shouldn't be, at least.
Yeah, and I think a big thing that we do too is not only define it, we try to make new definitions of what it is to explain it. So we, even that's why the English language is so vast and has so many different meanings in one word. Like let's say love, for example,
Yeah.
where the Greek had like 5 different loves, um, sacrificial love,
Yeah.
you know,
I don't even know if I can remember them all. As a Christian, I'm ashamed of myself. I
yeah, it's
can't
like
think of them.
sexual, it's
Yeah,
it's friendship,
it's
things.
philo,
Yeah, it's
sterge,
yeah, but
agape, and what else is like 4 months?
yeah. So, but what we do is that's why the English language is so tough, is we can take one word, and if you look in the dictionary, some English languages have like 3 definitions depending on the way you use it.
Yeah, and I mean, in a simpler form, it's like your, there.
Right.
There's different spellings. They all have different meanings, but they sound exactly the same.
Yeah. And what we do too is we take that word love and we define it the way we think it should be.
Yeah, and that, I mean, especially with the word love, that seems like something that
Or hate.
or hate,
Even
yeah.
the worst, like even hate or
Like, oh, I hate this song.
Yeah.
Do you really?
You really? That's a strong word.
Yeah,
We
it
always
is.
told our kids, like, hey, that's a pretty strong word when you say that.
Yeah, that's
don't
usually-
use that,
It's usually when someone really has a hardcore emotion to something, is when they find a new word about it. When you find a new word, that means that something got to you.
Yeah. And it's interesting. If you look at the history of, like, say, the English language, and how, if you read like even a few hundred years before Shakespeare, even Shakespeare is a little difficult, but we probably wouldn't even understand what they were saying.
Oh,
And it was considered English,
yeah.
to where it's now. Think of it now, another 200 years from now. I mean,
Like tis the East,
yeah,
and Juliet is the
right.
like we don't use the word tis.
Yeah.
Tis the season.
It's like, reading the King James version.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Thou there, thou.
It's beautiful, but
but it doesn't. So in a world where we're easily offended, I mean, if we could be honest, the polarization that's happening in the world, like, I see a lot of negativity towards the church. You get a lot of college students saying things like Christianity is the oppressor of them. Like, well, I want to know what church is oppressing you. If you can call that out, feel free. Christianity is the religion of our oppressor. That's what they said.
yeah. And think about that.
Have you ever
been actually oppressed?
Yes. And
Can you
America,
define what oppression is?
Yeah,
that's why I'm saying, like, you really can't understand it.
You go to a $50,000 a year college and you're oppressed.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You have access to do anything you want. You have access to change yourself.
That's why I think, there's areas of this country that are hurting,
That's because we don't know oppression. We've grown fat.
I mean, there's parts of this country that are dealing with this, that have these issues. And I think that's why we see a lot of this being portrayed in the actions of, like, the kid that killed these children. Like, there's issues that we're dealing with when we're just on the surface issues, rather than getting to really where the problems lie in some of these minds, and what these kids are going through.
Well, yeah, and also it's the young, the younger generations right now. There's this, like, state of mind that says, well, that certain things are rights that are not rights. Like a home is a right. Health insurance is a right. Let me tell you something. We do very well in this country for people that are having a hard time. We really do. I believe this country does the right thing by people that are going through a hard time. But at what point does it become your own responsibility? Now, when you don't adopt responsibility as a key figure in your unhappiness, you're missing something that is tremendous, something that actually is freedom. And that's a lot what the Bible talks about. The Bible is just not some philosophy book that you pick up and you get inspiring quotes from and you stick them on your refrigerator. That's not what it is. The Bible actually talks about how hard personal responsibility is, the importance of obtaining property and having your own space and your family and values to support in them. Now, I haven't been a Christian my whole life. A lot of this stuff I've learned late in the years, but it has helped me in ways that I've never been able to be helped
As a
before.
Christian, that's what we do. We use the word, and that's why we call it the word, to define these things in our life, you know. And when I say the word
Mhm.
it's truth. It's you know, what is the truth? You know, when John speaks of the word becoming flesh, you know, and the word was God, you
Mhm.
know, that word is logos,
Yes.
right? Which means an expression of something.
Yeah.
So we use, even in the garden, when God had Adam name the animals, it was using the expression of what the image of that thing is. This is a cup,
Yes.
or you know, a phone. We put a definition on something so we could describe it.
Absolutely. And in giving that image, um, you know, the uh, the character definition by words, what we're doing is we're separating and we're able to isolate um, what things are through those words, and for that have a better understanding of it in our brains, which actually helps us evolve as far as like
Thought.
intelligently.
Yeah.
Yeah, thought evolution is very important
Right.
if you're going to come to a point of understanding. I think personally, I mean, like the problem that, and I said this before, but the problem is that when it comes to communication, we get offended very easily, you know, and everybody, and we want our safe space, and it's like, but you have to pick and choose your battles. And that's another thing that the Bible talks about. It's just very important. You cannot ask, um, to not be offended, but yet want to grow. That's
Yeah.
being double-minded. That doesn't work. Like, for example, if you go to a university, right? And you go to a university with a bunch of like-minded people and a bunch of like-minded teachers, what are you going to gain from that? A degree that says you've learned something that you didn't? Because if you haven't been offended and your safe space hasn't been violated, you haven't been challenged. There's no growth there. And
Not
if the
even just
words,
not just even being offended, but it's kind of, it's like, if it's raining, you're going to get wet. So if you're going to be surrounding yourself of those same things, you're going to be defining those same words and meanings the same way.
yeah,
You're not going to see it differently.
exactly. You have to be challenged. And in order
Yeah.
to be challenged, you have to be able to handle offense. And you
Look
have
through
to,
history. I mean,
yeah,
you look at some of the great even philosophers. The reason why, you know, they had these ideas is because they thought differently, you know.
yeah. Well, that's what it boils down to. I mean, let's talk about Jesus as a revolutionary here. Let's talk about what it is.
Right.
He came out knowing the consequence of going against everything that tradition had changed in the words of the Bible,
Right.
and he died for that. Well, he died for us, but he died in the process of doing that.
Right.
And I think that's a really important thing. Being rebellious starts with not following what everybody else is doing, you know? And
Yeah, people can look at that also like as Christianity, you know. I'm not gonna be consumed in that because that's what's gonna happen. You know, I'm gonna now be taking, you know, my mind's gonna be taken over by this Christian worldview, this Christian view.
yeah. And this is supposed to be, and this is supposed to be a good conversation, and the truth in conversation is supposed to be what we're giving to each other primarily. Fundamentally, that's the foundation of relationship.
Yeah.
That's what we're supposed to be doing. So in Matthew 18:15, and I love this, it says, Moreover, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. O'Rourke could have really learned something
Oh
in that
yeah,
moment.
definitely,
You
definitely.
know, if he hears you, you have gained your brother. But if he will not hear, take one with you, one or two more with you, that by the
Yeah.
mouth of two or three witnesses, every word may be established. So the importance of pulling somebody aside and giving them the respect of speaking to them in private, and while speaking to them, engaging them like a human being and not trying to demonize them, will gain you a brother, or in women's case, a sister.
And if not, you take others with you. So then
So
this
they
is
can-
kind of like a picture of also church discipline,
yes,
where if there's an issue that you bring it to them,
yes,
even in your life. And then if not, then you know what? I'm going to get somebody with me saying, hey, you know what? This is the issue that we're having. He's my witness. Let him tell you also,
yeah.
this is the issue.
When you hear and listen, it's nothing maps out the human heart and brain like the Bible. Because
Right.
fact is, if one person tells you something, you may question it if you're not really willing to face the logic. But
Right.
when three people sincerely approach you about it and say, listen, this is the reason why, you're more likely to listen. Now, mind you, everybody says that like that's still a thing in court. That's why we have witnesses in court when you're talking about someone swearing on the Bible and telling the truth. It's an important thing to have witnesses. You're talking about something that dates back thousands of years that is still the truth. That's
Mhm.
important. The reason, you know, and if you want to test if something is the truth, you can't just test something that became popular or became excuse me, or something that became a social construct 2 years ago due to somebody on TikTok. You have to look at things that have withstood the test of time. Time is the only true measure of truth when it comes to things that work.
Yeah.
Period. You can't sit there and say, "Oh, well, you know what? I know it's been happening this way for thousands of years, but just because it's been happening for thousands of years doesn't mean that it works." Yeah. You try doing something over and over and over that doesn't work until it works. Tell me how that works out for you.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, language changed because of things, kind of
Yeah.
like there wasn't always a train, but now we know what a train is.
Yeah, we have to invent new
we
words
have to
for things that are
we,
invented.
we call it this. So this is what I call it, you know? So
Yeah.
now that's what it becomes, is that,
Mhm.
you know, and we kind of define that. I mean, that gets into where people believe in, like, you know, metaphysics and speaking in things out to existence.
Affirmations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
affirmations and things like that. But that's not what the purpose that God gave us. Words is because we see it as, this is like when somebody makes you a logo, it's your image that defines what your company is.
Yeah. And listen, the Bible does talk about affirmations, but it doesn't
Yeah.
talk about affirmations and empty actions.
Yeah.
That's the difference for it. There has to be a cooperative effort between the mind, body, and soul to say, okay, if I'm going to affirm something, number one, it has to come from a pure place. I don't want to affirm something like me right now. I want that new Chevy Silverado. I can't do
I'm
it.
gonna keep saying it until I get
I'm gonna
it.
keep saying it till I get it. I'll be sitting in my front yard while they taking the furniture out the house saying,
Yeah.
I'm going to Chevy Silverado.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with setting a goal, saying, hey,
No,
I want a
no,
Chevy
but here's the
Silverado.
thing. If you're going to set a goal, there has to be a purpose for the goal. Don't just say,
Yeah.
I want a Lamborghini because somebody else has a Lamborghini. Like, I want the new one because it would be nice to load things up for the house because I have a car and it's really difficult. And because I don't want to have to keep repairing a used vehicle. But there has to be a purpose for every goal. And I think this is important when we're talking about words and truth, because your word is your bond. And it has to
Word.
be based in truth. Word bond.
Word up.
That's what, yeah. It's like, you know, so it has to be based in truth. And when you're
Yeah.
talking about things that you want out of your life and things that, you know, it can't be something that you just feel you deserve. It has to be something that you honestly need.
I mean, that's also, when you say like your word is your bond, that's also the basis how we tell our lies and how
Oh,
it's
yeah.
how we are dishonest.
Let's talk about that.
Like that's how we can be dishonest, by switching it a little bit or changing it a little bit, or, you know,
Yeah,
out of the same mouth, comes that same
Yeah.
What we want to speak truth, but at the same time, we also want to speak lies. We
Yeah.
want to
It's
deceive.
like that old saying, you kiss your mother with that mouth. It's
Yeah.
not just for cursing in the
Right.
sense of curse words. It's in the sense of just lying. Now, that's a part of the Bible that we all cringe on, because there's a certain level that hits everybody when it says put aside all lying.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, is that possible? I mean, I don't know. I'm not.
Well,
you
I
know,
think one of the way the Bible teaches us how to combat that, it says, take all your thoughts captive to Christ.
yeah.
So I think before usually that old saying, think before you speak, like if you take it captive and then hopefully it doesn't come out that way. Because what did Jesus say? That everything that defiles man is not what you put in the
It's
mouth.
not what you put in, it's what comes out. Yeah.
And even I think in James, it talks about how the tongue is a dagger. I'm gonna look it up, but it's dangerous. Your tongue could be dangerous.
You can now think about the tongues that have affected the people that commit horrific acts. Think about the people that have been around them. Like a lot of the times, like I didn't think a lot of the things that I was doing growing up, in my earlier years, parenting, whatever, were toxic, but just because it seemed sociologically acceptable. So I had to really take into consideration, like now, like I said, wow, look, I made mistakes. And it's funny because we hear that language a lot, like, oh, you have to forgive yourself. Well, technically, you can't forgive yourself. Other people have to forgive you. You have to become okay with making the mistake and moving on.
Right.
Yeah. And when it comes to making bad decisions, I think we could all agree that we've made, we've all made mistakes that have affected and hurt other people, and still to this very day maybe hurting people. But in respects to what the Bible says about God's will, even your worst action still enforces God's will. The worst thing that you've done is still going to help God's will play out. Now, it may not be the right side of the story you wish you were on.
Yeah, this is interesting because in James, he goes into it pretty much, because he also talks about how, let not many of you become teachers,
Yeah.
because knowing that as much will occur, you will require strict judgment,
Yeah.
He's like, because we all stumble in many ways. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able to bridle the whole body as well. I
stumbled like 10 times in this podcast.
Yeah. Now, if we put the bits into horses' mouths so that they will obey us, we direct their entire body as well. So he's talking about how you use your mouth and your language. Look at the ships also. Though they are so great and driven by strong winds, are they still directed by a very small rudder?
Exactly.
Wherever the inclination of the pilot desires.
Yes.
So also the tongue is a small part of the body, and yet it boasts of great things. See how great a forest is set aflame by a small fire, and the tongue is a fire, the very world of iniquity. That's strong. The tongue is set among our members as that which defiles the entire body and sets on fire the course of our life, and is set on fire by hell.
Wow. And I love that, because it reminds me of like in Isaiah, where it says that he was crushed for our transgressions. He was
crushed for our iniquities.
And so on, like just the language of iniquities and transgressions. Now, you may not believe what has been done for you, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't been done for you. You're talking about God sending his son to die for you. Like, I don't think any of us have the strength to do that. I mean, that's something that is such a powerful statement. And I think only until you come into the reality of it does it affect you the same. Because if you don't, it's just a story. Right. But put yourself in that position. Are you willing to sacrifice to an extent that you don't really understand? And what God asks for us in return is that we crucify our flesh. And part of that has to do with the lies that we tell versus the truth that he gave us. And that's the most important balance that we have to constantly be aware of in our day-to-day walkings. if we're going to talk about the power of words, we really, and I'm glad we brought this up, talking about the power of lies. So as Sean said before, that the tongue is basically the rudder of the ship.
Mhm.
You have to think every direction that you go. If your life is going down a wrong path, it starts with your heart, it starts with your mind, your thoughts, and it's manifested through your words. I mean, like, listen, if you insult people or you constantly put people down, you're not going to have many friends. It's just, that's an obvious thing.
Right.
It's like
It was a good
toughen up.
Yeah, and
like,
it was a good metaphor for showing that how that the words that you do use, and it's not even in speaking, it's also in writing, especially nowadays.
yeah,
How
typing.
once once you put it out there, it's it's almost impossible to get it back. So what kind of words are you portraying out into the world
Yeah,
or into your life? Like we've talked about this before, where the best thing you could do is speak life into someone.
absolutely. Even somebody that's insulting you.
Yeah.
So like right now, you see a lot of confrontations with people over the recent events that have been happening, and you're hearing two different perspectives on it. But let me tell you something. I'm very, very cautious around groups of people or individuals that immediately go to insults when they don't like being asked a question.
Yeah.
That is that's a red flag when it comes to me. If you're dealing with people in your life and they're immediately their go-to is an insult, there's not much thought being taken into the things that they're standing for then. I mean, like, what do you stand for?
Yeah.
Why do you stand for it? And can you stand for it in open conversation without an insult?
Right. Right. I mean, I think in James, I was just about to go to it, not in James, I'm sorry, in Romans, um, doing that, he speaks about, what is it? Let me just go to it real quick. When you do that, your enemy is coming against you. When you speak life into them, even though that they're doing those bad things, he's like, you'll pour coals of fire on their head.
It'll really tick them off.
Right. Well, not only just take them off, what he means by that is like, and I taught my kids this, is that hopefully they'll see, although that they're spewing lies and hate on you and whatever it is, and you are speaking life to them, hopefully they'll see that coal is the the remorse that they'll feel for doing that, even though you're returning it with good. It says that's why I said you don't.
Yeah,
return
that's where we get the term "kill them with kindness." It
Yeah.
was just taken from that and reworded. And
Right.
listen, and that's fine, but it still means the same thing. Hence the importance of words and the truth that lies behind it. But it's funny. It's similar in like jujitsu and stuff, and even in like Wing Chun. Like, the more you try to force something when you're rolling around with somebody on the ground, is the more that they use it against you, and the quicker you tire out.
Right.
If you allow people to do as they wish, but just keep your defense up, your true defense up, they really can't hurt you. And that's very similar to language. If you've mastered it, I mean,
Yeah, it's actually Romans 12 where he talks about the renewing of mind. But if as you go through it, he kind of talks about how to live your life in service to others. Verse 4.
that's tremendous.
Yeah.
Right there.
So it's the renewing of your mind, and then it says, you were given this grace. So you should give it to others, for just as many members, talking about the members in the body, says, since we have gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, each of us is to use it and exercise them accordingly, and then as you get to the end, as talking about gifts and stuff like that, he says, rejoice in hope, preserving the tribulations, devoted in prayer, contributing to the needs of the saints, practicing hospitality, bless those who persecute you, bless, do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Be of the same mind towards one another. Do not be haughty in mind, but associate with the lowly. Do not be wise in your own estimation. Never pay back evil for evil to anyone. Is Jesus right here.
Yeah.
Respect what is right in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men.
Hold on one second. Respect what is right in the sight of all.
Right.
Can we just like take a minute on
Take
that?
a minute of that? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's this whole part
Truth.
is like really tremendous. But to respect someone else's right to disagree with you is a fundamental biblical principle. And the reason why it's so important is because, Paul's coming from the understanding that, listen, we're actually here as servants to others, even your enemy, like, listen, we're still supposed to represent and deliver the truth, you know, by our actions, by our words, to the people that hate us, and to not become anything like them in order to do that.
Yeah.
To understand that just because someone is acting evil or doing things that offend you and have hurt your feelings purposely, it doesn't mean that there's not something going on inside of them. And what Paul is saying to us is that, listen, acknowledge through your imperfections that you can understand what it's like to be imperfect. And it's a very difficult thing for us to deal with at times, especially if we've morally improved. We tend to think that our moral improvements actually create a high ground to others. And that's not true, because immoral is immoral, mistakes are mistakes, and we're all guilty of them.
Mhm.
But through that should be a place where we can come to a common ground. And we don't really do that well these days.
Right. And he also goes on to say, in doing that, when you respect what is right in the sight of all men, be at peace with them. Never take your own revenge.
Yeah. Be at peace with them.
Leave it up to God, because he quotes, he says, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay," says the Lord.
Yeah.
And then he says, "But if your enemy is hungry, feed him. And if he is
Exactly.
thirsty, give him a drink. For in doing so, you will reap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good."
See, that's something that we have a hard time with. Now, it makes total sense why you have a lot of people running around rejecting the Bible right now, because they don't want to do that part.
Right. And what I think he means by that too is, like, when you do that, the hope is that you will prick the conscience of that person.
Absolutely.
Because
that's the hope. Yes.
Yeah, that would change the way they, kind of like what we saw Peter Beto O'Rourke do.
Yeah.
Instead of coming up there and it's on your soul, it's your fault. Coming up and say, "Hey, you know what? This is a tragedy that just happened. What can I do?" Forget about who we are as political.
It's like, listen, I don't care what's going on. You need me. I'm here to help us.
I'm a fellow Texan. I'm here to help you.
Because sometimes we allow our opinions to define what we are as a person. But what really defines us as a person is the actions that we take in unification. And I'm not talking about, like, for example, like, there was a lot of talk about the word unifying around the election.
Unity.
There's going to be unity. There's going to be, what is your definition of unity? That means if you agree with me, we're unified, and everybody who else is not allowed to speak. Like, that's not unity. Like it's a tough thing to talk about, because people say, will we ever be unified? No, but that is not the point either. The point is, how do you get through a time where you're severely divided? How do you get through it, and how do you maintain hope that maybe more unity will come?
Right.
And
I think the original, founding fathers, the unity and the being united was the same common faith and beliefs, and knowing, what morals we stood on as a people.
And yeah, I mean, listen, if everybody could have the same worldview as me, I think this would be so much easier. But that's not up to me.
Right.
I don't expect to live in a world where people agree with me, share the
But
same
that's what's great
worldview.
about this country. You can sit next to me and we can have this conversation, and it's okay.
Yeah. And it should be okay.
Yeah.
And so that goes back to what we were talking about, why we get offended. And listen, a lot of the reasons why we get offended is because we give more power to words that really don't have power, and less value to the ones that do. And that's a really, really rough place to be in.
Yeah.
Because the words that don't have value are usually the ones that we alter, change, and make up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the ones that do have value, like truth, we just say, well, like I saw we went to one of the protests last year, um, and there was a kid walking around with a shirt that said "Live your truth." Well, that's a very vague statement, because what you're basically telling people is that whatever you deem,
Subjective.
yeah, it's subjective truth. Whatever
Yeah.
you deem to be truth, you should just live that. Well, what if his truth was to take a car and ride through a parade full of people?
Right.
Is that okay to live his truth? Because I don't think living my truth ever did me anything. I think I'm a better person now that I don't
If
live
that
my
meant
truth.
like, if live like you love pizza.
I do.
Yeah.
I do live like I
You
love.
know,
That's a problem.
that's
though.
subjective. Like people, I don't know who doesn't like pizza, but like some people might not like pizza.
Who?
I don't know. I'm just, you know,
I don't know.
maybe
anybody.
pizza's an objective truth then. Maybe
Yes,
everybody's
pizza is definitely an objective truth.
Yeah.
Yes, very true.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're going to talk more about this. We were kind of thrown off because
Yeah,
of what
this-
happened.
yeah.
You know, and we're very saddened by it. You know, we're both men here with children,
And very I would say I'm also disappointed with the reactions of our leadership in this country.
Yeah.
I'm very disappointed because number one, we had a couple of them in a row. All different people from all different backgrounds are starting to commit the same acts, and you know it's reflective of something that's very deep rooted in our society that is not being addressed. And we keep hearing people banging on tables saying we have to do something. Something's got to happen. Well, tell us what's got to happen then.
It's the Christ crisis.
If you just want to bang the table and say, I'm tired of this, something's got to happen, well, you know what? We can all agree on that.
Yeah.
So now let's start talking about what really has to happen.
And really what's really bugging me is that they're thinking it's some sort of law that has to be passed, or some sort of regulation that has to be passed.
Because once again, criminals don't care about laws.
Well, even the criminal thing, even some sort of like what the school has to do or don't do, or you know, how about let's try to like love our neighbor? How about reach out to the child, or find in your community that place that has kids.
How about
that youth group that you can come and mentor a child or become his father figure or mother figure, and go there and say, you know what, maybe you can make that change in that child's life, so that when he doesn't have some sort of animosity to others or things like that.
We live in New York, so like, how about when you're walking through the city, how about you don't mind your business? Right. How about when you see somebody hurting, you donate a little bit of your time, you give a little bit of yourself. How about you start caring about the people around you instead of walking by it and say it's not my problem? How about we start there?
Yeah, or planning somebody else is going to fix the problem.
How about we stop holding cell phone videos in the midst of tragedies?
Yeah,
and start interacting and trying to be the really truthfully the better version of us.
Yeah,
you know, we should start there.
Yeah. And same with me. You know, we had that guy I spoke about last week that gave that story that I told you with the dream and everything. Yeah. He was actually part of a group that he came to our church and spoke, but he has, I wish I had it here. I don't have it with me, but maybe I'll bring it out next week. That it's here on Long Island. It's a Christian mentor program where you in your church, you can sign up. And what they do is they've, you know, first interview you, vet you and train you and things like that, but they assign you a child that doesn't have a father or doesn't have a mother figure.
Yeah.
And you become their mentor for life.
See, that's awesome.
You know,
and listen, if you are saying to yourself that is a lot of commitment, yeah, it is. But name one thing in your life that hasn't been the most rewarding,
what's more important.
Yeah.
You know?
What is more important than mentor? Because let me tell you something. Kids don't like to tell their parents everything.
Right.
So if you could be that ear for them to talk to and that voice to give them some type of guidance, just do it. Just do it, because that's important to situations like we're going through right now. It's very important to be that ear for somebody who's going through a hard time, because them being unable to process suffering and having a mature voice to be able to guide them in the right direction after means well. And I'm not talking mature by age, because the guy, one of my first mentor was like, I got to say, like 16 years younger than me.
Oh,
Will
really?
Buchanan, what's up, man? Yeah, great time. He used to
Nice.
let me babble because I was like, my brain was exploding. Like, wow, I'm learning all these things about
Right.
God. It's so cool.
That's cool.
And he would just be like, wow, like I'm learning so much too. And I'm like, wait a minute, but like you're supposed to be mentoring me. And it taught me a lot about humility. And he taught me so much. Like he has no idea how much he actually taught me by just letting me let my brain explode in front of him. So being a mentor is an important thing. And that's
Yeah.
not something that a lot of the world really spends time with. I'm not talking about being your life coach, business mentor. I'm talking about being a spiritual mentor, like a person that's going to help
Yeah.
you process these emotions and give you a good, strong, godly outlook about how to approach them.
Yeah. And then if you can pour out into your life into someone else, whether it's a young child you're getting, or if it's that person you see when you walk in the store every day, you get your coffee in that certain place. If you just speak a little life into them, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. It starts with a relationship. Like, if you're inviting people to church and they're not coming in on Sunday, well, how about it starts at 7-Eleven,
Right.
And walk in the morning, get your cup of coffee, commit a kind act for someone, give someone a smile, hold open the door, like anything. Start a conversation with a person. If you're uncomfortable with talking, break your comfort zone. Start talking with people.
Yeah.
Because things don't happen until you start.
Yep.
Yeah. Sean's breaking the equipment.
I want to shake it up. I want to
All right,
shake it up.
So I think next week we could probably touch on actual origins of words, and we'll give up some good examples about like actual words that we use every day, that where the origins of them came from. You probably wouldn't believe them because some of them are really silly, but these are the ones we use. But there
Right.
is meaning behind them. We'll talk about some obvious instances. I'll get some clips together. We'll do some fun stuff about language, and we'll really break down the war on words a little bit more, and we'll give you some examples of how it's being used recently, right now, in front of your eyes, and you're not even seeing it.
And not only that, on how that when it started, I mean, even from the beginning, how words are being changed and manipulated to change, the way we look at things in our lives, right?
Yeah, most important. So we want to say thank you for all of y'all tuning in. Let's give them a big boom, thank y'all for tuning in. You have tuned in to Aletheia Radio, the only podcast that truly and honestly loves every single audience member.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
You will find it nowhere else but here.
And we'll see you next week.
Next week. Pray up. Pray for someone you don't really like today.
Yeah.
Take the time to do something a little different. Be a better version of you.
Reach out to someone you haven't reached out in a long time to. Whether it's a family member or whoever it is, reach out to somebody and just say, hey, you know what? I was thinking about you. I love you. I care about you.
Even if it's just that.
Yep.
All right, y'all.
All right, guys.
Check you out next week.
Peace.
Peace.